Hello everyone and welcome to another Commander Tactics Deck Tech. My name's Pope. In today's video we're going to be focusing on the main focus of the Commander format, which is obviously winning and that no one else has the opportunity to do anything they wanted to do. And that's why we're going to be brewing around Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger from the new set, Theros Beyond Death. Kroxa is a 2 CMC commander only costing a black and a red. When Kroxa enters the battlefield, he brings pure sadness to all of our opponents. First off, if we didn't cast him for his alternate escape cost, then he decides that he doesn't even want to stay on the table and must be sacrificed. Also on entry and on attack, each opponent is going to have to discard a card. And each opponent who discards a land card or can't discard a card at all loses 3 life. The wording may seem a bit confusing, but just remember, they discard a land or don't discard anything, means they will take the 3 damage. And then if we want to bring Kroxa back, we can pay his escape cost, which is black, black, red, red, and exile 5 other cards. The escape mechanic is something new and something that I think is going to be very exciting to build around. So our deck will be really hammering home on the discard ability provided by our commander to make sure everyone misses all of their land drops and cannot stop this hate train. On each entry and on each attack, we're going to be able to make each of our opponents kiss their hands goodbye as we laugh our way to an easy victory. In order to keep the ball rolling though, we will also need to make sure that we have a full graveyard to be able to cast Kroxa for his escape cost. So we'll be running lots of spells that will also help us mill, dredge, and discard as well. Simply forcing our opponents to discard isn't going to be enough to win us the game, so we're also going to be running a full suite of cards that punish our opponents each time they discard a card and when they have no cards in hand. And lastly, we're going to be pulling out some rather unusual and fun janky combos in order to close out our games if our opponents haven't already conceded. Best part of this deck is that it can be picked up today for only around $65, and that is using the pre-sale prices on some of these cards, so it might even be cheaper at release of Theros. But enough of the small talk, let's get talking about how we're going to make our opponents hate us with all of the discard cards that we're going to be forcing on them. Starting things off with Bite of the Black Rose and Capital Punishment. Each of these sorceries is going to allow our opponents to get involved in the discarding decisions that we're putting upon them. Bite of the Black Rose with Will of the Council. Starting with you, each player is going to vote for Sickness or Psychosis. If Sickness gets the most votes, then there will be -2/-2 to all creatures until the end of the turn. And if Psychosis gets the most votes or is tied, each opponent is going to have to discard 2 cards. Ideally, we're going to make our opponents discard, but in the case where the board is full of a bunch of tokens, we might need to use it for the -2/-2. And Capital Punishment, starting with you, each player is going to vote for Death or Taxes. Each opponent sacrifices a creature for each vote of Death, and each opponent is going to discard a card for each Taxes vote. Obviously, we're going to vote Taxes, so there's a good chance that this equals sack 3 creatures and discard 1 card. Next up, we got 3 creatures going to make our opponents reduce their hand size some more with Burglar Rat, Liliana Spectre, and Banshee of the Dread Choir. Burglar Rat for only 1 and a black, a common from the Ravnica set. Whenever it enters the battlefield, each opponent is going to discard a card. Pretty simple, easy enough, and an early drop to help defend us against anybody who might swing out. Liliana Spectre, whenever it enters the battlefield, each opponent is going to have to discard a card as well, and it has flying, so a nice easy way to get in for some damage. And Banshee of the Dread Choir has Myriad, such a unique ability that if you're not familiar with, it means whenever this creature attacks, that for each other opponent than the defending player that we originally attacked, we get to create a token that's a copy of this creature. It's tapped and attacking all players. And at the end of combat, we exile the tokens. But whenever Banshee of the Dread Choir deals damage to a player, that player is also going to have to discard a card. So there is a chance we can get all of our opponents to discard a card thanks to this 4/4 spirit. And then we've got a couple cards that are not only going to make our opponents discard cards, but make us discard some as well. This is good for us as we are trying to fuel that escape cost on Kroxa. Burning Inquiry and Dark Deal. Burning Inquiry for only 1 red mana. Each player is going to draw 3 and then discard 3 at random. Obviously, before we cast Burning Inquiry, we want to play the best things from our hand, and then we won't really care what the 3 we discard are. And Dark Deal, each player is going to discard all the cards in his or her hand, then draw that many -1. Each of these spells is going to trigger so many of our enchantments and other effects that we just don't care that we are losing some cards in the doing so. And then lastly, 2 bomb discard spells, Cabal Conditioning and Words of Waste. Cabal Conditioning's updated text says any number of target players each discard a number of cards equal to the highest CMC among permanents you control. So if we've got one of our big enchantments down or a big creature, we can make our opponents discard their entire hand. And then Words of the Waste, one of the MVPs of this deck. For 2 and a black, we get this enchantment on the board that says we can pay 1 mana, and the next time we would draw a card this turn, instead each opponent has to discard a card. With quite a few card draw effects built into this deck as well, we are going to ensure that our opponents have no cards in hand at all times. And now with all the discarding that we are going to be forcing onto our opponent, let's take a look at how we're going to capitalize them by making them get punished for each card they do discard into their graveyard. Starting things off with 2 sorceries that are not only going to make our opponent discard cards, but also ping them for some damage in doing so with Skull Rend and Arterial Flow. Skull Rend deals 2 damage to each opponent, and then they will have to discard 2 cards at random. That text "at random" is so sweet because it ensures our opponents aren't holding up the best stuff. And then Arterial Flow, similar effect, each opponent discards 2 cards, and if we do control a vampire, each opponent's going to lose 2 life and we're going to gain 2 life. Unfortunately, we are only running 1 vampire in this deck, so there's a good chance this is just make our opponents discard 2 for 3 mana. Next up, we have 3 core pieces of the deck with Megrim, Liliana's Caress, and Fell Spectre. All 3 of these spells have the same effect, and it reads whenever an opponent discards a card, it is going to deal 2 damage to that player. With multiples of these out and the constant discard we are going to be bombarding our opponents with, these are absolutely going to help us win the game and dealing tons of damage across the board. Then we have 2 spells that are going to benefit us by whenever we discard a card, we get to do some damage to our opponent with Glinthorn Buccaneer and Faith of the Devoted. Glinthorn Buccaneer for 1 and red, we get a 2/4 Minotaur Pirate that says whenever you discard a card, Glinthorn Buccaneer is going to deal 1 damage to each opponent. Then for 1 and a red, we can discard a card and then draw a card, but we can only do this if he is attacking. With all the discarding that we are also going to be doing, Glinthorn Buccaneer's damage can add up really quickly. And Faith the Devoted, for 2 and a black and enchantment, whenever we cycle or discard a card, we can pay 1. If we do, we are going to drain our opponents for 2 and gain 2 in the process. With any of these permanents on the board, it is going to be like salt to the wound. With each discard, they're also going to be drained for a little bit of life each time. And then lastly, 2 more spells that are going to benefit off of us discarding some cards, Archfiend of Ifnir and Bone Miser. Archfiend of Ifnir, a demon for 3 a black and a black, has flying. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, we get to put a -1/-1 counter on every creature our opponents control. Archfiend of Ifnir is like a constant board wipe that we can keep progressing over and over with each card we discard from our hand. And if maybe we get him too early or we don't need him on the board, we can cycle him away for 2 mana. And Bone Miser, the new zombie wizard coming out of the Commander 2019 product, says whenever you discard a creature card, we create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Whenever we discard a land card, we get to add 2 black mana, and then whenever we discard a non-creature, non-land card, we get to draw a card. I'm sure you're starting to see that even though we're going to be discarding a lot of cards, we're going to have tons of effects that are going to let us recoup those losses and gain lots of benefit off of it, keeping things in our hand to cast for later. And then if the discarding and draining isn't enough, we are running the awesome jank combos in this deck that are going to leave our opponents thinking, what the heck just happened? Starting things off with one of my absolute favorite 2-card combos, and that is Demonic Pact and Harmless Offering. Demonic Pact is an enchantment for 2 a black and a black that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, you choose one of these options that hasn't been chosen. Either it's going to deal 4 damage to a creature or player and we're going to gain 4 life, target opponent's going to discard 2 cards, we're going to draw 2 cards, or we're going to lose the game. Obviously, we don't want to lose the game, so before that 4th trigger resolves, we want to cast Harmless Offering that says, target opponent gains control of target permanent you control. After we've already used up all its good stuff, we're going to give Demonic Pact to an opponent who at their upkeep is going to be forced to choose that final option. They lose the game. While there is a real chance we don't get the combo off and we might just lose the game as well, if we can force our biggest threat to accept the Demonic Pact and lose the game, then it was all worth it. Next up, we have a rather flexible combo using the new card from Theros Beyond Death, Underworld Breach. Underworld Breach is going to give all of our non-land cards in our graveyard escape, allowing us to recast them again and exile 3 other cards when we do so. If we have a stacked graveyard, we can cast Underworld Breach and then proceed to cast our rituals like Mana Geyser and Dark Ritual to get a ton of mana in our mana pool, and then cast something like Earthquake to deal X damage to each creature without flying and each player. There's a good chance through all the draining and pinging from the discards that we probably will have the most life at the table, and a big Earthquake can just end things. And then rounding things out, maybe not truly a combo, but these 2 cards, Altar of Dementia and Geth's Grimoire, are going to combo with so many different cards in our deck. Altar of Dementia is going to allow us to sacrifice a creature and make a target player mill the top card of their library equal to the creature's power. Altar of Dementia pairs so well with Kroxa, allowing him to be able to come back from our graveyard for his escape cost and always keeping our graveyard full. It's also a good benefit that whenever Kroxa enters the battlefield for the first time, with his ETB on the stack, we can sack him to Altar of Dementia to mill ourselves for 6 before he has to sacrifice himself. Just an extremely powerful card and a great addition to this deck. And Geth's Grimoire, for 4 mana, we get an artifact that says whenever an opponent discards a card from his or her hand, we get to draw a card. Obviously, there is going to be a ton of discarding happening, so with Geth's Grimoire on the table, we can ensure that our hand is full at all times while all of our opponent's hand is empty. But now that we've seen how we're going to discard our way to a win, let's take a look at what else we have inside the 99 to help us get there. Pure removal and control in this deck is boiled down to about 12 different spells and effects, but we also have tons of abilities that are going to make our opponents discard their best stuff. Our card draw and advantage comes in the form of 10 different spells and creatures, keeping our hand full at all times, including that Geth's Grimoire that is going to load us up. Our 9 ramp spells are comprised mostly of artifact spells, but we do have a couple creatures going to help us get those lands that we need. And the power level of this deck comes in near a 5, sitting nice right in the middle. This deck is synergized, it is focused, but there are definitely ways we can upgrade it to take it up another level. And then how exactly are we going to win with this deck? Well, first and foremost, we are going to abuse Kroxa's ability to be cast for only 2 black and 2 red each time he goes to the graveyard. Through his effect alone, we are going to ping our opponents multiple times and make them discard the things that they want to keep in their hand. Then we're going to combo that with all of our nice permanents that are going to make our opponents take additional damage for each card that they discard. And if that doesn't get the job done, we can combo off using something like Underworld Breach to do lots of damage thanks to our ability to cast things from our graveyard. A few budget alternatives for this deck include Sire of Insanity, Asylum Visitor, and Outpost Siege. Sire of Insanity, a creature that says at the beginning of each end step, that's every player's, each player has to discard his or her hand. This is going to ensure that no one has any hand on the board, while also giving us a big 6/4 body. Asylum Visitor, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, if that player has no cards in hand, we get to draw a card and we lose a life, and it has a madness cost, so if we discard it, we can play it straight back onto the field. And Outpost Siege going to let us keep card advantage even without keeping them in our hand. It says at the beginning of our upkeep, exile the top card of our library, and until the end of turn, we can play that card. And then if you're looking to upgrade this, try to boost its power level a little bit, you can run things like Angrath the Flame Chained, Reforge the Soul, and Anvil of Bogarden. Angrath the Flame Chained Planeswalker from Ixalan says each opponent discards a card and loses 2 life for his +1 ability. Then we can also gain control of a creature until the end of turn for his -3. And then for his -8, each opponent's going to lose life equal to the number of cards in their graveyard. Reforge a Soul, a Wheel of Fortune for 3, a red and red, but with the 1 and red miracle cost, says each player is going to discard his or her hand and draw 7. And Anvil of Bogarden, a 2-cost artifact, says each player skips his or her discard phase, so no maximum hand size. And then, during each player's draw phase, that player is going to draw an additional card and then choose and discard a card. All of these are incredible additions to help us ensure we maximize the amount of damage we do through discarding. Also, don't forget that we do have a giveaway going on for the goods that we cracked in our Bitter Blossom secret lair a couple weeks back. That giveaway runs until January 23rd, so if you want to know how to enter that, you can find the link down in the description. There are a few ways to enter, and we'll be picking 3 lucky subscribers to win those awesome prizes. But that is a wrap on this Rakdos discard madhouse of a deck. Kroxa seems like the type of commander that's going to show up and crash every party, whether he's invited or not. This deck may be what some people would call cruel and unusual punishment, but the last time I checked, Magic and Commander is all about one thing, and that's winning at any cost. But what fun cards did I miss, and what cards did I add that are just not getting the trick done? Let us know down in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, and if you want to know when our next awesome deck tech comes out, make sure you hit that subscribe button. A new deck tech does come your way every Friday. If you're a Twitter user, you can head on over there, drop us a follow at EDH Tactics. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you for the next one.